I wanted to give a sort of like a last words, an epitaph to Shadowlands, because there are many of us here in chat, not all of us, but many of us or whatever. There is a number of us, all right, in chat that was here for the whole thing, day after day. Some of us closer to it than others. You know, for me as a content creator, obviously, I'm in it. I'm in the game. I am in the conversations. Even, you know, I'm not in the game as in like, you know, I'm doing like playing like the high end, top end shit. I'm just, I mean more. I'm observing like the mood and like the day to day vibe of how people are feeling about WoW at the moment. And Shadowlands was a bag, yo. It was a lot. Uh, yeah, it was a lot to swallow in an expansion where uh, that ended up being a mixed bag. I mean, it started off with even the announcement kicked off with doubt because there were some immediate reactions to covenants and meaningful choice. There were immediate questions about, well, what if we make the wrong choice? What if these choices aren't great? Or how is this going to be balanced? And people had like the right takes, being like, it's not going to be balanced, no way. And it's going to split people apart. It's going to, it's not going to be great. I being me, I'm always like supporter of these things, and I'm like, oh, let's just wait and see. You guys might be right, but I wanna feel it, right? I wanna feel the impact of this. This I'm just talking about the announcement. As soon as I play tested, I pretty much solidified what kind of I pretty much solidified my Shadowlands mood because the way that I play, I don't subject myself to, oh my god, I gotta chase the best thing, I gotta make the right choice, otherwise I'm gonna get kicked from the group. I run the group, I don't give a shit what I choose, I'll never lose my spot as far as I'm concerned. So as soon as I did that playtest, and I popped in as a paladin, of course, and we were able to try out the Kyrian ability stuff. I tried out Divine Toll for the first time. And back then it was like way broken. Like I think it was like you can throw unlimited shields or something like that, or like all targets around you were hit with an adventure shield, some shit like that. And I was like, oh my god, fan of shields. And that's when I coined that term, and I'm the only one who says it. I don't care. It was the best. And from there, it was like me putting on these glasses, these rose tinted glasses. And that's how I looked at Shadowlands for like the entire expansion. All these things that are going on, it's okay, because I got fan of shields, man. I got the best possible ability that a protection paladin can get. And because of my playstyle, because I only play as like the one class and the one spec, it was easy for me. And it didn't feel very different. It just felt like, oh, here's Avenger Shield, but better. That helped out. That helped out tremendously. But of course, when I flipped them glasses up, I saw like this dystopian hellscape. That was the Maw, basically. It was rough. It split players between those who like are just okay with it, like, hey man, what's the problem, and those who felt those legitimate problems because their playstyle conflicted with conflicted with each other. And so again, we get players kind of pitted against each other in rhetoric. I'm right, you're wrong, you're wrong, I'm right, yada yada yada. And it's that made it really rough. If covenant switching was a thing from the start, if there was no ripcord to pull, if it was just like a thing, a regular thing that people could do, how would we react to it? It's a little hard to say, because, well, that wasn't the only thing that was going on. It was a big thing that was going on, and something that was there from the very start. And that was rough. The delay was rough. The delay was something that we never really experienced as WoW players. Like, expectation, it's one thing to be like, hey, I expected this to not suck, right? That's one thing. But it's another thing to be like, hey, I expected it to be on this date. They had an announced date. They started the hype stuff. And then 4 weeks later, that's when they announced that they were going to delay it by a month. And people were like, whoa, that's something else. I think this came on the heels of the Warcraft 3 reform. I forget which came out first now, but I guess that's not too important. But it was troubling for a lot of folks. It super magnified the doubt, because by then we were already like, okay, Covenant switching, this is really sketch. Conduits, I'll get to that in a little bit too. I'm going out of order. That was a thing too. But now a straight up delay. It's like, oh man, why the delay? Oh, because they wanted to get endgame stuff better. They wanted the Maw stuff that wasn't quite working out the way that they wanted to. And what's unfortunate is that they didn't delay it further. In hindsight, because hindsight is so great, we should have had another, 3 or 4 months, really. Something like that. Maybe even longer. I've told myself, and I've expressed to viewers in the audience, that when the 9.0.5 patch launched, that was probably when Shadowlands should have actually launched, whenever that was. I think that was March or something. And with that sort of time, the WoW team woulda, coulda, shoulda done better stuff with, we would have seen a different sort of endgame experience, a different sort of Maw. They probably could have done a lot more stuff with Torghast, and I'll get to that too. There's just so much that woulda, coulda, shoulda been done, but they needed to meet that date. And I think that turned out to be the wrong call. Now, maybe there were some binding obligations. I'm sure there were. But that ended up hurting them pretty bad, in my opinion. Because what we got at launch, it's one thing when we say something feels unfinished, but this really felt like strung together very quickly, and it didn't have to. And I think that the push to get those things out is what led to all sorts of developers leaving. They're like, okay, maybe I'm not feeling it after this. I'm sure there are a billion reasons apart from the Shadowlands launch why a bunch of developers left, even early on. But it stung, and we felt it as players because people, they were stuck in their choice. They had to go into the Maw for this thing. They had to do Torghast for this thing, and they had to get the Conduits and blah, 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 blah. Conduits were... and Conduits, I think, are kind of a small thing, but they could have been so much worse. Think of Torghast and the whole need of having to farm up that soul ash and capping it out for the week. You had to do your cell blocks and do all that in order to get the things that you need so you can make the legendary, blah, 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 blah. That part sucked. And I'll talk about that more too, but now I'm talking about Conduits. Conduits originally, the original iteration of Conduits, and they spoke of this, and this came in late in testing. They'd be like, oh yeah, they're little enhancements for your abilities. They have different power levels, different, they have item levels to them that come from different difficulties. But the original plan was that if you wanted to switch out your Conduits, you had to go get more Conduits. So if I got, Conduit A and I replace it with Conduit B, if I want to put Conduit A on again, I need to go back to where Conduit A drops and get it again, which created this perpetual loop of having to run dungeons or raids or whatever so you can get replacement Conduits. And the thought in my head was, this was a complete thought? What? They gotta change this. And so many people agreed with the sentiment that this is doo-doo better, and so it changed. And it changed instead from that, which was a dystopian like WoW, to this whole conduit energy thing, which was much more narrow in how it impacted people. But for the people who were impacted, that shit sucked. It kind of elicited these feelings of helplessness. It's like, hey, okay, I'm going to do these things, and now I want to push high keys, and I want to do well, but I can't until tomorrow because I need more fucking energy. That was really frustrating for people. But when you step back and look at it, like what the WoW team at that time was trying to encourage was this perpetual loop of maintaining your character through the constant farming of conduits. You're not there to push keys. You're not there to get gear or do well. You were there to replenish. You were there to get more conduits again. Then you can do the thing that you actually want to do, which has been a prevailing theme in this era of borrowed power in WoW with these continuous loops and all that. Now I'll talk about Torghast a little bit. Torghast as a gameplay thing was cool for a while, but what quickly spoiled it was when folks like me would talk about it. And I would talk about, all right, guys, you got to do this Torghast thing each week. It doesn't take long. Here I am trying to reassure people. It doesn't take long, guys. Your pain and suffering will only last for about 45 minutes or so as you blow through these things so you can get your soul ash and get the required things, and here's the calculation and blah blah blah. Now, and of course those things applied to people who were progression minded, who wanted to stay right there. They wanted to very quickly get those big power boosts through their one legendary at the time, so they can get the business done, or they'd be able to adapt to what they wanted to do. But again, it created this loop. This loop where you had to do those things in order to prep your character to be that malleable piece of work in order to do dungeons. Oh, do I want to do dungeons first, or do I want to do raids? So which legendary thing am I going to make first? And so we had to make those sorts of choices, which can sound fun, but in practice, when you're like, okay, my choice made me good at this for now, but I either gotta wait or I'm just going to suck for a while at this before things get better. That doesn't feel good, because you could be waiting days or perhaps weeks before you can complete your character. There's a lot to take away from Shadowlands, but it really we really reached, like, early Shadowlands, definitely we reached that apex of having to do all these side things that may or may not interest us in order to get a thing, so that way we can do the thing that we actually want to do. Raid, PvP, Mythic Plus, just dick around or just feel complete. Have our character feel like they're done and they're complete. And that burned a lot of people. That burned a ton of people. And even smaller, here, like, what I consider a small speed bump would be like the Maw. What was the thing with the Maw? People feel like they had to do that because they needed to get socket upgrades. I think that was one thing. And then going in to get souls so that they can get, like, their redeemed souls, they can upgrade their Covenant Sanctum and all that stuff. Now, when it comes to not casual content, but when it comes to, like, more world-based content, I'm much less sympathetic to that sort of stuff, because the sense of urgency is very personal. It's based on, like, that individual, because that doesn't exactly affect everyone. And so I don't really connect with people the same ways. And people will disagree with me. That's 100% fine. But this is just, coming from me. I don't... I didn't really feel that. But yeah, even things like the Maw feeling like a speed bump, that just crushed people. OMG, how dare they disable my mounts and all that stuff. Meanwhile, druids and Worgen are like, say what? What's going on? Zoom, 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 haha. even small things like that felt felt discouraging for people, because the maw was a thing that they felt like they had to do, and you only had a limited time in there, and it was constantly trying to kill your ass. So that, early Shadowlands just felt really rough, right? 9.1 is where 9.1, 9.1.5 is where things really started to turn around. But it was more like this slow pivot rather than a U-turn or like a big, this big dramatic shift. But it helped. It was nice that, or it did feel nice that flying was available earlier. It was nice that the Maw just became a playground for rares after that. Sure, you couldn't fly, but the Maw was not a very big zone anyway. Once you did get on a regular ground mount, it wasn't so bad, my opinion. All right, tanks unite, right? That part, those weren't so bad. But I think what really what I feel burned people, and all of us are gonna have like different measures of takes here. I think what burned a lot of people was that people did expect like a big turnaround, a big shift. Okay, cool. The WoW team's got their shit back together. They're totally used to all this pandemic stuff. The work from home stuff. And now 9.1 is gonna be a fucking banger. And from an activity standpoint, I thought there were some cool things that came from 9.1. Farmable things, just having an additional playground. But there are a lot of other folks that were out there just being like, oh my god, they just taped something to the Maw, strung it together with literal chains, and be like, all right, here's your content, guys. And from a conceptual standpoint, Korthia felt very disappointing because it just looked like they ripped something out of like what could have been Drustvar. They threw some Titan stuff on it and called it, kind of called it a day. As a loop, I thought it was cool because it gave me, I'd be out there in the morning, before my streams would start and the show would start, and I'd be out there farming for like the rares, and it had that kind of feeling of a launch. Of a pre-launch thing where you have like this cloud of people zooming over from one rare to another, and that felt neat. We're all slamming stuff, and there was, that's when we saw like this whole weekly loop of, hey, do what you want, build up your stuff, start earning things through different activities, and some of that stuff extended to the Maw. That whole thing with jumping into like a dead version of stuff, I thought that was a really cool concept because it kind of redefines the zone, both the Maw and Korthia in a certain way. I thought those were cool ideas, but it wasn't enough. People were just wanting like something that made it not feel like Shadowlands. They wanted the Covenant switching to be a thing. People wanted to be free of it. I think the biggest screw up of 9.1 excuse me, came from the raid, with one Sylvanas, because that was wow, that was a hell of a fight, but two, the concept of the raid as well, the whole notion of domination armor and domination shards. It was clunky is not a word that I like using, but I'm sure that it's a word that people can lean on easily. It was too unwieldy. It was too much. It was a thing on top of a thing on top of a thing before it was fun. And I found that to be frustrating for people on my team who wouldn't show up late, who wouldn't show up all the time, or people who would show up late, or people who would switch to an alt eventually. That sort of system, it just didn't feel like it was fully thought through, and there could have been easy implementations of domination shards to make it way cooler, or at least to simplify it. Like if there was some sort of catch up to power those things up, or if it wasn't dependent on gear. If it used, I think of something like the Netherlight Crucible, which was its own wonky sort of thing. But if it was something that was detached, and it was like, and it used like this separate UI thing, and it happened to be an account-wide thing, that would have been awesome. That would have been cool. That way, hey, fresh alts can jump in with fully powered up shards, and they can just play with the set that they want, and we can all dick around. My team had this. I was obsessed with the blood affix, the one where you hit a target, and then that target is forever dotted, and every time it ticks, you get healed, and if you're full, it heals someone else. I love that thing because it was different. It was so unique compared to like the other ones. It was just boring little DPS things. With that, I can use fewer healers. I called it Blood Gang. I'm like, all right, guys, let's get together. Let's Blood Gang this thing. And so we'd go in and do fights with no healers for as long as we can until like the burst was too much. And then, but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed experimenting with that. But the problem, going back to, so these fundamental problems that WoW has faced during this era, is that we had to prep our characters for it, and it took forever. That part's not fun. And it's very unfortunate that it took so long for the WoW team to really start turning around from that. And being like, all right, we think you guys might have a point. The Blizzard lawsuit really fucked things up too, though, man. That one was just like it was like, Shadowlands brought folks to their, brought folks' faith to their knees. And then the Blizzard lawsuit was just like, was the guillotine. It really like turned people away. It was like this perfect storm, this Yahtzee of, well, fuck, man. And there's nothing, there's nothing to contest that. It's a terrible thing. It's a shitty thing. Blizzard has bled for it, and I'm glad. I'm glad that they're hurt by it, because that's what they deserve for it. Now, as for how things are going now, we don't know. A lot of that stuff has been like kind of like kept under. We see like little articles every now and then, but I hope that thing continues. But it didn't help Shadowlands. In a way, it didn't help the mood of Shadowlands, but it might have. Maybe it might have been one of the things that helped. That helped to, turn things around. By that I'm talking about Dragonflight stuff, so I'm not gonna get too into that. But it did feel like, as soon as we got to 915, to me that was when the turn was kind of complete, and the WoW team was finally ready to start moving in a better direction. 915 brought the end of that whole Covenant switch thing. Now was a freely, we could just do it. And I don't even remember what else came in that patch, because that was huge. And it changed me as a player, like, greatly. I was already starting to shift my player behavior. I started to change my usual habits, because in previous expansions, I would raid log, I'd do my thing, and then I'd pop in for like a few dailies and whatnot here and there. But there wasn't like a whole lot for me long term that I was working for, not in current content. So I was like doing old raids, I was doing transmog runs, farming up old content, whatever. No big deal. So expansions like BFA, even Legion, like they felt dull because there wasn't a whole lot of stuff to work for outside of my usual thing. What was I gonna do? Get fucking artifact power? Try to get more legendaries or whatever? Get another piece of Azrak gear to pair? No, not really. So beyond the normal loops, it was, I was just kind of 915 though, it felt like, to me, this is definitely just a me thing, 915 felt like Shadowlands released again and again and again. because I was able to get access to those other 3 covenants. I never bothered covenant switching. I did it once by mistake, because short story. I did it once by mistake because I was on the PTR doing some stuff, and I was on the live client doing some other stuff, and I accidentally switched covenants on my live account. I'm like, uh-oh, this isn't smart. Wasn't that bad. I switched it on like a Monday, and then Tuesday I finished it, whatever. I was fine after that. Yeah, being able to freely switch was, it changed me. All of a sudden, I became this super hardcore transmog farming machine. I was like this big anima slut. And and my behavior shifted. My day-to-day, instead of like, oh, I'm just gonna pop on, play some other games, do whatever, and I'll come back for like raid time. Now I was doing it. I was like, oh, I'm gonna do like these covenant appearances. I'm gonna unlock these activities. I'm gonna see what's up with these with this Venthyr party stuff. And my eyes felt like they were open, because all of a sudden I'm discovering like all these little nooks and crannies of gameplay, and like little story bits, and like little bits of flavor that just made me appreciate the entire expansion a heck of a lot more, because I was able to experience all of that on one character. Things that disappointed me about Battle for Azeroth was that in order to really experience the entire story, I needed to play two kinds of characters, one Horde and one Alliance. And I still haven't really experienced the Alliance version of the story. I'll come back to that at some point. And, that's something that I can appreciate, that I can go back there and still find some replay value. Even if I'm not going to get it from a gameplay sense, I can get it from a lore sense. And that's kind of neat, as a long-term thing. Legion was a bigger disappointment for me, because it's like, oh, if I want to experience a story, I gotta play all 12 classes at the time. What? I don't care about rogues. I don't care about this class. I don't care about that class. And so, it felt distressing, feeling like, oh, I'm gonna play through these classes just so I can experience the story, and then I'm done. They were basically dead characters. Most of my alts are just dead characters. They're just there to string things along as they need to. And I felt like I had to do that. That sucks. That did not hit me the right way. Even though for folks who enjoy playing alts, for them it was fantastic. Their experience gets to feel different. I get that. I respect that. But for someone like me, it was just like, ill. So being able to then play through all 4 covenants and do all those things, that was huge. That was huge for me. That added months of activities and farming, and all the things, alerts popping up whenever I'd get a new thing, and planning for anima farms with this and this, and planning my grateful offerings thing. Like once I got into it, it all felt very chill. It was a really chill routine. The complaints that folks had about grateful offerings and things like that, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I got more than everything that I need. I'm trying to avoid activities that give me that stuff, because it's less of so it became different in a good way. And I enjoyed that. I was also with other activities, the mob became less of a thing. Torghast became less of a thing. We're able to get, more. We're able to get more stuff. Stuff was becoming account wide. Credit from Korthia becoming account wide. Things felt better. And 9.2 helped to improve that too. And that's when we're starting to see not just that turnaround, but to see what WoW is doing with this new direction, where the grindy stuff from Zereth Mortis has nothing to do with Raze, PvP, Mythic Plus, unless my memory is like all jacked up. But folks that only cared about that stuff didn't have to participate in those sorts of things at all. And people received that pretty well, I think. They were cool with it. Like, oh, whatever. I'll do this in my own time. No sweat. And then that's when we started to see like the whole notion of things being a bit more alt friendly, because that's important for folks. I try my best to understand that, but no, it started to improve. Things became a bit more account. We've already had a lot of account wide stuff, account wide credit. Exalted rewards for the most part. I'd say like 90% of that stuff is pets, mounts, things that are already account wide. People want more, of course. Everyone wants their pony to some extent, but we started to see that push. And 9.2 was pretty chill. I was still doing like all the Covenant stuff. I was still farming through those sorts of things, but also I was getting like a boatload of anima, so it just made life way easier to like get all those things. And then I was just focused on the Covenant activities and some of the pain behind those, like this RNG with trying to get like this last appearance from the Queen's Conservatory, or trying to get that one last quest type to spawn for the Stitch Masters and all them Necrolord stuff. And the Venthyr stuff was cool. That was a vibe. It definitely showed that between the 4 Covenant activities, not all of them were made equal. The Venthyr stuff, I felt like it had like the most time that was put into it. So congrats to those folks that were putting that together. Kind of sucks for the others, but because they were so different, it hit people a different way. And so people were able to choose kind of like the thing that they wanted to do, that sort of uniqueness. But even then, it still put a sour taste in people's mouths that people had to make those sorts of choices in the first place, and people haven't forgotten that. I feel like if there's a legacy, well, I guess I haven't talked about season 4 yet, but I guess the legacy of Shadowlands is that thanks to the Covenant activity stuff, there's definitely something to go back to. When it comes to previous expansions, and I'm thinking of BFA, I think of, okay, what is it that we have to go back to farm for stuff? And there are things. There's the zone content, especially Nazjatar and Mechagon. There are things there, and people still go back there to like farm for stuff. They gotta get that crab. They gotta get that wheel mount thing, unicycle mount, whatever it's called. There are things to work for, but they feel so soft. They feel so small compared to Covenants. It's just a lot. And I'd say it's almost too much because of transmog restrictions and what they did there. But they're learning from that. Now, we'd love for them to grandfather the lessons learned from Shadowlands, the things that they're learning going into Dragonflight. Hey, hook us up with the Shadowlands stuff there. But I think we've seen that, and maybe this will change, but we've seen that when the WoW team is ready to leave something behind, they'll leave that intact with respect to the people who had farmed it their way. And at least the way that I see it, like, the farms are there. It's to say it's not so bad is a bit douchey, but that's where I'm gonna leave it at, and I'm totally free for y'all to be like, no. But that's my thing. Yeah, I do feel like the legacy of Shadowlands is with what's farmable. These many appearances. It's a boatload of stuff. It's so much stuff. In fact, it's kind of too much stuff. And there are still lessons to learn from like all these different things that you can collect. I know that the Soul Ash thing, the Conduit, the Domination shards, like all those things matter too. Or yeah, legendaries and all that stuff. All that stuff matters, but it doesn't last. That stuff doesn't last. Power doesn't last. Transmog is forever. You get it. And so I think Blizzard left something good there. But again, lessons to learn from that too. A lot of it being like eligibility and account wideness. that I feel Dragonflight is the product of those lessons learned, where no, reputation is not bona fide account wide, because there are way too many drawbacks to that people don't like talking about. I'm not going to bother talking about it here either. But I think the lesson, the lessons learned for the most part from the WoW team is that activities, things to do, are no longer being like held back. Once you unlock it once, you get access to it when it comes to most rewards outside of power. And so the whole notion of account wideness boils down to two segments of, it boils down to two arguments. The argument that reputation and those sorts of things should be account wide with respect to professions, as in, we should get faster access to that, or always have access to that once our main gets access to them. And the principle of it, this murky, vague notion that the principle of it is that everything should be account wide, or that these many things should be account wide, and each time we should push the envelope further and further, and that debate is gonna keep happening. We all got our takes, we all have our tolerances, and okay, I'm cool with that, but account wide gear, oh, that's a bit too much. No way, we need to have account wide everything, and we're gonna see that like forever. So Shadowlands proved to be kind of a here's fat copium kicking in. It proved to be the capstone of hard lessons that the WoW team has had to learn. And we've obviously seen that it takes a while for those lessons learned or these mistakes to translate into actionable things. And it's still not perfect, but it's because we as players have so many different opinions that there's no way it's going to be perfect. No one's going to be 100% satisfied with what ultimately the WoW team comes up with. But right now, the future just looks pretty good. We're seeing less of that immediate doubt and more of the usual thing, as in, oh, are we going to be able to balance talent? No. Let's be clear. Talents are not going to be like balanced in the way that people like ever, because that's the nature of it. Not everything's going to be the same. Are people going to be satisfied with the cosmetics and how those things are farmed? Of course not. No way. Because people want now, and people want more. And the hunger, the thirst for all those cool things, and that's never going to end. But I think I'm gassed. I think that's all I got.